More than one client has said to me, rather insolently, in my opinion, as they walk through the door, as though there is a type, as though I need a peroxide crop and cruel sneer to do what I do, as though it makes a damn bit of difference what I look like when I'm in all the gear and they're whimpering on the floor. Then they know what my type is. Then they know who's in charge. For years, at parties, it was the question I dreaded most, that god-awful, unavoidable formulaic question. And what do you do? I used to pretend to be a software engineer until I met someone who was. Then I claimed to be researching a book about the Franco-Prussian War. I should have guessed that one of Philippe's friends would turn out to be an expert. I tried telling people the truth for a while, but that simply deferred the question. They would laugh politely, feebly, and ask me again, but what do you really do? Sometimes an honest answer is the hardest to swallow. We all prefer the credible lie to the incredible truth. These days I say I'm a translator of technical manuals. After 3 years in Paris, my French is good enough to sustain the fiction, and it certainly closes the subject. Not even writers of technical manuals want to make small talk about them. I got into the scene, I hardly need tell you which one, we're all grown-ups here, through Philippe. I was surprised to find he was into it when we were first going out. Like a lot of people, I thought it was mostly English public school boys who found perverse pleasure in spanking, whipping, dressing up, and all the other cliches of the subculture. I found it almost funny that my handsome, soigné, sophisticated French boyfriend was into BDSM. In fact, I'm pretty sure I even told him that he didn't look the type. But to please Philippe, and because I was half curious and half titillated by the idea, I indulged him. In fact, I got to rather enjoy it. The smooth, cool slipperiness of rubber against my skin, like the touch of a snake. The musky creak of leather, the breathless corsets, the complicated allure of stockings, and the precarious, vertiginous power of skyscraper heels, needle-sharp, shiny, and black. When Philippe had a big theme party, and we all dressed up in bondage gear, some of his friends showed an interest. So we had a smaller, rather more exclusive party. He was French, after all. To which they all brought presents. Tributes, Philippe called them, for the Mistress, which is what I had become. The next thing I knew, I was sitting across from Philippe at the breakfast bar, musing that I could make a lot of money if I turned professional. And he was agreeing, and buying me a little one-bedroom flat in Chorleywood and putting the right words, discreetly of course, into the right ears. And here I am. Well, not quite, I suppose. Here, being in a quandary in Pigalle, sans fiancé, and until I decide what to do about things sans clientèle. Philippe moved in with a minor Italian porn star about a year after I moved to Paris to spend more time with him. I can't say I really missed him, and by then I was certainly quite capable of carrying on without him. Being a dominatrix in Paris is very much like being a dominatrix in London, once you've learned the basic language differences, like the distinction between tu and vous. Shop assistants, strangers, and slaves must never call you tu. It's far too intimate. And the French for lick my boots. Lécher mes bottes, in case you're interested. God knows how long I could have carried on my illustrious career if it hadn't been for Adele. I didn't realize that Adele was a client at first. It was a Saturday morning, and I'd had some friends over the night before, wine, gossip, a joint or two. I was in the middle of making my morning espresso when the doorbell rang, and I was naturally unfocused and off guard, not to mention annoyed, when I opened the door. She stood there in silence. Early 40s, chestnut hair and a glossy bob, a slender figure, expensively and quietly dressed in the sort of unostentatious minor label outfit I myself might wear to go shopping. She was exactly the kind of well-preserved, milfy French matron you see on the Champs-Élysées every day. Of course, at first I thought she'd made a mistake. There's an aromatherapist in the apartment downstairs and a couple of personal trainers across the hall. It's that kind of building. But then she produced one of my discreet, suggestive cards, the kind I only give out personally, hand to hand. Maitresse Charlotte, she said hesitantly. A wife, then, going through her husband's pockets for laundry or other purposes. Or perhaps even a rival, a new dom on the scene, paying a courtesy call. Although, like me, she didn't look the type. Either way, I didn't want to conduct this conversation on the threshold. I glanced up and down the stairs. Fortunately, the hour was too early for my neighbors to be stirring. Yes, I said, you'd better come in. She came through to the kitchen, and hovered decorously, waiting to be asked to sit. I obliged, and she subsided elegantly into a chair, taking off her gloves and sunglasses and putting her handbag, Gucci, I noticed, and brand new, on the table. Espresso, I offered. Thank you, no. I made my own and sat opposite her, clutching the gaping top of my dressing gown together as I sipped. I felt strangely prudish in front of another woman in my own home. I let the silence between us burgeon. It's an old psychiatrist's trick, which works wonders on the more reticent clients, especially the ones with unusual requests. Silence makes people uncomfortable enough to tell you what they really want. Adele watched me steadily, with composure. I suppose you think I'm here to confront you, she said at last. I sipped from my tall glass of water. Not necessarily. I am, what, a rival then? A policewoman, perhaps? I laughed. Dressed like that, I know you're not a flick, I reassured her. I am the wife of one of your clients. I nodded. But you're not here to confront me. No, she said. She stared down at my card, which she had placed on the table exactly between us. I'm here to ask you a favor. At first, I refused. I've had some peculiar requests in my time, but never something like this, and never from a woman. My theory is that for most women, life is tough enough without seeking out pain at the hands of someone like me. Perhaps I was naive. She showed me a photograph of her husband. I recognized him immediately. He was a leading light of the opposition party, accustomed to the best of everything, a sensuous, fleshy silver fox. His colleagues, and the papers even, called him Le Renard. He'd come for a few sessions a couple of years ago and then suddenly stopped. I shook my head. I don't think I can help you, I'm afraid. Confidentiality, you know. I guarantee all of my clients absolute discretion. I thought you might say that, she said, a funny little half smile on her face. Could you then tell me exactly what it is that you do? And why should I do that? I said. Because I want you to do it to me. One of the first things you learn in this game is how to inflict pain invisibly. The majority of my clients are married or have mistresses, girlfriends, or gym buddies who'd start asking dangerous questions if unexplained welts and bruises appeared. There's only so many times, even in Paris, even in London, a man can get mugged. I took Adele gently through my menu, describing the specific services and scenarios I offered, and she nodded and asked serious, sensible questions, the politician's wife right down to her manicured fingertips. I told her that I would be very careful, that there would be no telltale signs, nothing to betray her. That was the only time she displayed any emotion. She gripped my wrist hard and said that she wanted it to show, that she wanted the cuts and the bruises, as many and as obvious as possible. I don't want you to hurt me without leaving a mark, she said. That's what he does. And then she said something that really freaked me out. Violence is like justice, don't you think? She murmured quietly, giving me that Princess Diana look from under her lashes that I now recognized from the society pages and the TV news. I felt something in my stomach curdle and shudder. What do you mean? I asked, not really wanting to hear the answer. She looked down at my list of services. I remembered her fingers like a handcuff around my wrist. It must be seen to be done, she said. I should have left it there. I should never have agreed to go through with this. But I could see that for whatever reason, she needed this and needed it badly enough to come to me and to pay for it. And strange as it sounds, I wanted to help her. I'm having breakfast in a cafe about 3 months later when I read in Le Monde that Adele is filing for divorce from her husband. There are a couple of articles on the case, one in the politics page and another longer, more speculative, a feature really, in the society section. The journalist voices the rumor that Le Renard's violent and abusive behavior towards Adele is being cited as grounds for the split. Apparently it had been going on for some time, well before he'd ever come to me, thank God. When I get back to my apartment, there's an enormous bouquet of flowers waiting for me, a monster of a thing, big enough to block the door. My clients often give me extravagant gifts and tributes, so I don't think much of it until I heave it indoors and onto the kitchen table and get a look at the card buried in the heart of the blooms. A single word, Merci, and an initial, A. And those bloody flowers are what I've been staring at for the past 4 or 5 hours while my espresso goes cold and my ice water melts untouched beside me. Because, odd as it may sound, I've never really thought of what I do as more than an elaborate game of make-believe. All the props and costumes, all the bad porn dialogue, and the hackneyed, worn-out scenarios make it anything but terrifying for me. Make it laughable, ridiculous. I never equated what happens in my private rooms with actual violence. And yet the pain I inflict on my clients is real, like all pain, even if it doesn't leave a mark. And it occurs to me that perhaps Adele's husband didn't come to me in order to be punished or to surrender control after a hard day with the world on his broad and plausible shoulders. It occurs to me that what he may have wanted from me and got without my realizing was a way to punish, a way to exert control without being caught, without leaving evidence. No wonder Adele wanted me to give her bruises. I could imagine the scenes in the police station, the gentle questioning, the physical examination, the measuring tapes, the Polaroids, proof at last. Perhaps the only way Adele ever would have been believed. Perhaps not. The men that come to me want to be hurt. Through pain, through punishment, they find pleasure, peace, and forgiveness. At least that's what I've always told myself, what Philippe always told me. But I was never the best dominatrix in London, or even in Paris, because I never had a real appetite for it. And now that I know they deserve everything they get, I'm not sure I can do it anymore. But I'm not sure that I can stop.